It was a Tuesday when everything snapped, not in a dramatic, movie-style explosion of yelling and door slamming. No, it was quieter than that. It was the kind of snap you feel in your chest, subtle but final, like a hairline fracture becoming a full break. My name's Aiden, I'm 28, and until 3 weeks ago, I lived with my parents in the same house I grew up in. It wasn't ideal, sharing a roof with your folks at nearly 30, but I had a plan. I'd been working full-time at a logistics firm for 5 years, slowly building up savings. No vacations, no big splurges, not even a proper gaming setup. Every paycheck, I'd set aside what I could, tucking it into a high-yield account titled simply, First Home. It wasn't just a dream, it was the dream. My escape. My someday. I didn't mind living in the converted attic above the garage for a bit longer if it meant that one day I'd have keys to a place that was mine. I'd scroll through listings late at night, imagining what I'd do with a tiny backyard, how I'd paint the walls, the kind of quiet that didn't come with footsteps above your ceiling or the sound of your dad's TV bleeding through the floorboards. My parents knew I was saving. They even used to make little comments about how disciplined I was. At Christmas last year, Dad clapped me on the back and joked, "You'll own a house before you own a new pair of shoes." I laughed too. At the time, it still felt like we were on the same team. The dynamic in our house wasn't toxic exactly, but it wasn't balanced either. My younger sister, Brianna, moved out when she was 21, but even now at 25, she had this magnetic pull over our parents. Every time she came home, they lit up like the sun had walked through the door. She'd tell stories about work, she's in marketing, and they'd hang on every word like she was delivering a TED Talk. If I mentioned anything about my job, it was always, "That's nice, dear," followed by a quick pivot to Brianna's latest accomplishment. She had recently gotten engaged to a guy named Chase, who was, to his credit, very polite, very clean-shaven, and very into craft cocktails. The wedding planning had taken over every dinner conversation, even though it wasn't happening until next year. Still, I kept my head down. I was used to being the afterthought, the responsible one, the quiet fixer. Need someone to help move a couch? Aiden. Can't figure out the printer? Aiden. Someone has to wait at home for the new dishwasher delivery? Aiden again. I didn't complain. It felt like part of the deal. Live at home, help out, keep saving. I thought we had an understanding. But over the past couple of months, I noticed things were shifting. Strange comments. Questions about my savings that didn't feel like idle curiosity. One night over dinner, Mom casually asked, "How much do you have saved now? You must be close to a down payment, right?" I remember feeling a jolt in my chest, like I'd just been called on in class and hadn't studied. I shrugged it off with, "Still saving. Not quite there yet." She nodded, but something about the way her eyes narrowed stuck with me, like she was adding something up. Then the kitchen demo started. It wasn't a small facelift. It was a full-gut job, cabinets torn out, walls knocked down, shiny new island planned, marble countertops, new appliances, the works. It caught me completely off guard. My parents had always been practical, borderline stingy. The stove we'd had since I was 10 still had one burner that only worked if you smacked it just right. I remember coming home from work one Friday and seeing the fridge unplugged, shoved into the hallway. The next morning, contractors were there, boots stomping across the tile as they took measurements and shouted instructions. I asked about it at dinner that night, keeping my voice light. Did I miss something? When did we decide to remodel the kitchen? Dad barely looked up from his plate. Your mom wanted a change. It's been overdue. Mom gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. We figured it was time. And it benefits all of us, doesn't it? I nodded slowly, still unsure why it felt off. But the bigger hammer was yet to fall. It came a week later, when I was trying to log into my bank account to check my balance, and the screen flashed a message, insufficient funds. At first, I assumed it was a glitch. I backed out, refreshed the page, tried again. Same thing. I blinked at the number. 0. Not a dollar left in the First Home account. I just sat there, staring at the screen like it would explain itself. It didn't. I ran downstairs, phone in hand, adrenaline rising like a tidal wave. Did one of you touch my account? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom didn't even blink. Oh, that, she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. We used it for the kitchen remodel. I laughed. I actually laughed. What are you talking about? She turned to face me, lips pressed together. You live here, Aiden. This house is your home too. We needed a new kitchen, and you benefit from it just like we do. It felt like the floor had dropped out beneath me. That was my life savings. And now it's part of your home, she said, like I was being difficult. Don't be dramatic. I turned to Dad. You're okay with this? He gave me a half-hearted shrug. Well, I'll enjoy it. You can't take money with you when you're dead. That was when I asked the question I didn't want to ask. How did you even access my account? Mom smirked. That same tight little expression she made when she thought she was being clever. We know your password. You use the same one for everything. Always have. You left your laptop open one day. My stomach dropped. I felt exposed. Violated. Not just because they stole from me, but because they'd snooped, cracked into something that was supposed to be mine. They didn't even try to hide it. They acted like it was normal, like it was fair. That night, I didn't sleep. I packed. I froze every account I had, changed every password, called the bank, flagged the transaction. They said they'd open an investigation, but since it was technically a family transfer and I hadn't filed a police report yet, there was little they could do right away. I didn't bother arguing. I was already done. I left at 3 a.m., before sunrise, just threw my duffel in the car and drove to my friend Logan's place across town. He'd offered me his spare room months ago when his roommate moved out, and I'd said no at the time. But now, the key he'd given me just in case burned in my hand like a lifeline. I didn't leave a note. The next morning, my phone was lighting up, texts from mom like nothing happened. The contractor is coming at 10. Can you make sure you're home? We need to decide on the backsplash today. And finally, when I didn't reply, where are you? Then came the kicker. 2 days later, the contractor called me. Personally. I had no idea how he got my number. Hi, Aiden. Your mom said you'd be handling payment for the counters this week. Just wanted to confirm the transfer time so we can stay on schedule. I didn't even respond. I stared at my phone, heart pounding, as the realization hit me harder than anything else had. They weren't done taking. They were still expecting more. And that was when I knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't respond to the contractor's message. I just let it sit there on my phone like a ticking bomb. I wasn't ready to confront it yet. I wasn't even sure how to process it. The idea that my own parents had drained my account was bad enough, but that they'd just keep passing along invoices as if I was their personal bank? That made something in me crack. Logan noticed it that morning. We were sitting in his kitchen, sipping coffee. Or, rather, he was sipping. I was just holding the mug, staring at it like it might have answers. You alright? He asked cautiously. He wasn't the type to pry, but Logan and I had been friends since college. He knew my moods like clockwork. They used my savings for the kitchen remodel, I said. My voice came out flat, like I was reporting the weather. All of it. Every dollar. Logan blinked. What? Your parents? I nodded. But didn't you say that was for your house? I gave a weak laugh. Yeah, that's what I said too. He set his mug down. Tell me you're joking. I wish I was. Logan didn't say anything for a minute. He just sat back in his chair, jaw tight. Dude, that's theft. Yeah, well, I muttered. They're calling it a family investment. He looked at me, eyebrows raised. You call the cops yet? I shook my head. Not yet. Trying to figure out if I can even prove it. Logan didn't pressure me. He just said, well, you're not paying that contractor. And you're staying here as long as you need, alright. I nodded, and for the first time in days, I felt like someone was actually on my side. The following week was radio silence from my parents. At first, I thought they were finally realizing I wasn't coming back. That maybe they were feeling some sliver of remorse. But then Brianna called. Aiden, what is going on? She asked, her voice dripping with annoyance instead of concern. Excuse me. Mom and Dad are freaking out. Contractors are threatening to walk off the job. They said you ghosted them. Why are you making this such a big deal? I felt my fingers curl into a fist. They stole my savings, Bri. That's what. Oh my God, she groaned. You're still on about that? I blinked. Still? It happened last week. She scoffed. You live in the house. You use the kitchen. Why are you acting like they robbed a stranger? I took a deep breath. Because they did rob someone. Me. She didn't reply immediately. When she did, it was with that voice she always used when she wanted to feel smarter than everyone else. You're being petty. They raised you. They supported you. You owed them something anyway. That line hit like a slap. I owed them. They had siphoned off my future and called it a debt I owed. Something in me flipped, hard. Tell you what, Bri. You can pay the next invoice. You still use the kitchen too, right? She went quiet for a beat, then muttered, I don't have that kind of money. Neither do I said, and hung up. For a while, I tried to go back to normal. I focused on work. Logan kept me company, but my thoughts kept circling the same drain. The sense of violation. The casual way they'd taken everything from me. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about the message underneath it. You don't matter as much as we do. Then I heard from Aunt Denise. She called out of the blue, which was unusual. She only ever called for holidays or funerals. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Aiden, honey, I just wanted to check in on you, she said, her voice unusually gentle. I hesitated. Why? Well, she sighed. Your mom's been calling everyone. She says you abandoned the family and left them in the middle of a remodel. Said you took off without warning, and now she's stuck with unpaid bills. I felt my blood boil. She what? She's making it sound like you committed some kind of betrayal, Denise continued. Like you were supposed to help out, and you ditched them instead. I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a breath and said, she stole my life savings, Denise. I didn't abandon anyone. There was a long pause. Then, to my surprise, Denise said softly, I figured there was more to the story. I told her everything. Not for pity, just to get it out. I told her about the hacked account, the smirk, the contractor, Brianna's lecture. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. When I was done, she let out a low whistle. Wow, that's a lot. Yeah. You know, Aiden, she said. I always knew your mom could be forceful. But this is different. That word stuck with me. Different. It validated everything I'd been struggling to articulate. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a betrayal. Over the next week, I started to see the ripple effect. I got texts from extended family, cousins I hadn't talked to in years, all asking the same question. Why did you bail on your parents? Why would you leave them hanging? Is it true you emptied your own account just to spite them? They were rewriting the narrative, painting me as the selfish son who didn't want to help. And the worst part? People believed them, because I'd always been quiet, passive, the one who never made waves. I was being erased and replaced with a caricature, all while they basked in their new quartz countertops. One afternoon, Logan came home with takeout and tossed me a soda. You doing okay? I shrugged. As okay as I can be while my parents tell everyone I'm some financial terrorist. He chuckled. That's a hell of a title. I smiled weakly. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email. Subject line, payment reminder, final notice. It was the contractor. Again, he'd attached the invoice. And this time, he CC'd me and my father. I scrolled through the email, heart pounding, and then froze. There it was. A copy of the signed estimate, with my name on it. Except, I never signed anything. I printed it out and looked closer. The signature was close. It even matched how I sign. But I knew my own hand. I never authorized that. I never even saw that document. They forged my signature, I whispered. Logan looked up. What? They forged my signature to make it look like I agreed to pay for the counters. He stood slowly, eyes hardening. That's illegal, dude. I nodded slowly, a mix of fear and fury building in my chest. I sat down, printed another copy, and opened a new folder on my desktop. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting, I was documenting. Screenshots, emails, texts, call logs. I filed a fraud report with my bank. I called the contractor and told him, flatly, that I had not signed that estimate, and that any future invoices would be considered harassment. He didn't reply, but the next morning, I got another call. This time from my dad. Aiden, he said, tone sharp. What the hell did you tell the contractor? I didn't answer right away. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is for us to get a call like that? We trusted you. That was the moment. That exact sentence. We trusted you. I almost laughed. You trusted me? I said quietly. You hacked my account. You stole my savings. You forged my signature. And you trusted me. There was a beat of silence. Then he said, well, maybe if you weren't so selfish, we wouldn't have had to. That was it. The final crack. Something broke wide open inside me. All the years of brushing things off. Of letting them take without pushing back. Of being the good son. The patient one. The afterthought. I wasn't going to be their ATM. I wasn't going to be their scapegoat. Not anymore. And that's when I started making real plans. Plans they wouldn't see coming. I didn't sleep much the night after my dad said, maybe if you weren't so selfish, we wouldn't have had to. The words repeated in my head like a skipping record. I laid in Logan's guest room, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me, feeling like the world had turned inside out. They stole from me, lied about it, forged my signature, tried to bury me in debt. And when I pushed back, they made me the villain. That was the bottom. The moment it all finally sank in, not just what they did, but what it meant. I wasn't going to get an apology. There was no lesson they'd suddenly learn, no warm family reconciliation scene waiting in the third act. They believed they were right, justified, righteous, even. And that realization, that hollow, bitter truth, wasn't just painful. It was freeing. That night, around 3 a.m., I got out of bed, made a list, and for the first time since leaving home, I stopped reacting to them and started focusing on me. Step 1. Get my money back, or as close to it as I could. The fraud claim I submitted to the bank was still under review, and I wasn't holding my breath. Technically, the transfer had been from me to a household account, which blurred the lines for them. But the forged signature? That was a different story. I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer the following week, someone who specialized in financial abuse and family fraud. Logan's coworker had gone through a messy inheritance battle and highly recommended the guy, an older attorney named Harold, who looked like he hadn't smiled since 1993 but had eyes like a hawk. He took one look at the forged document and said, we can work with this. Hearing that alone felt like breathing after being underwater too long. Step 2. Get out of survival mode. I'd been drifting emotionally, eating whatever Logan had in the fridge, answering work emails mechanically, avoiding social media like it was poisoned. But slowly, I started reclaiming my rhythm. I changed my phone number, closed the old email tied to all my family contacts, and created a new one just for personal use. I picked up an extra freelance side gig doing logistics consulting online, and it paid better than expected. 2 weeks in, I'd already pocketed enough to start building a new savings account. This one under two-factor authentication, and with a password even I could barely remember. I didn't tell anyone. Not Logan, not my coworkers, no one. I was done explaining myself. Done seeking validation. This rebuild was mine. Step 3. Set boundaries. Iron once. Mom sent me a text one morning out of the blue. The fridge came today. Looks amazing. You should come see it. Smiley face. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just an emoji and an invite to admire the thing they bought with my money. I didn't reply. She followed up 3 days later. Brianna's coming over Sunday for dinner. You're still welcome, you know. I stared at that one for a long time. Welcome. Like I was a guest in a home they gutted me to renovate. I didn't block her. I just muted the thread. No more giving their words real estate in my head. Around that time, Logan came home from work one evening holding a 6-pack and 2 burritos. You are not going to believe what I found, he said, plopping down at the kitchen table and pulling up his laptop. It was a real estate listing. A small one-bedroom condo about 20 minutes away. Nothing fancy, no backyard, no fireplace, no Instagram-worthy lighting, but it was clean, well-maintained, and more importantly affordable. Thought you might want to look, he said. I know you're still recovering, but figured it couldn't hurt to browse. I didn't say anything for a moment. Just stared at the screen. The pictures. The hallway. The modest little balcony. A place that could actually be mine. I'm not ready yet, I said finally, voice quiet. But thanks. He nodded, didn't push. Just handed me a burrito and cracked open a beer. I didn't open the listing again for 3 weeks. But when I did, I saved it. Just in case. As the weeks rolled on, the pieces kept falling into place. The lawyer had sent a demand letter to my parents, outlining the fraud and requesting repayment under threat of civil suit. I hadn't told him to go nuclear. He did it himself after reviewing everything. Harold was blunt. They're banking on you being too nice to fight back. Prove them wrong. The response came 2 days later. A formal letter from a different lawyer, one I recognized as a family friend. It was patronizing, full of soft language like familial misunderstanding and mutual benefit. At the end, it offered a settlement, $8,000. They took nearly $38,000 from me, and they offered 8. I didn't even have to think about it. I told Harold to reject it outright. He raised his eyebrows. You sure? I nodded. They don't get to lowball their way out of this. He leaned back, clearly pleased. Good. Let's proceed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't playing the peacekeeper. I wasn't smoothing things over, shrinking myself down to avoid conflict. I was standing up, and it felt good. Not loud or dramatic. Just solid. Like I'd finally grown a spine thick enough to carry my own weight. And then some. Around that same time, something unexpected happened. I got promoted. It wasn't flashy, a new title, a modest pay bump, but it came with more autonomy and the freedom to work from home 3 days a week. My manager, Alicia, pulled me aside and said, "You've been dialed in these last couple months. Keep this up, you'll go far." I didn't tell her what fueled it. That every spreadsheet I crushed, every client I impressed, was powered by the anger and betrayal I'd swallowed like fire. I just thanked her and took the win. I used the bonus to finally buy something for myself. A desk. A real one. Not a hand-me-down. Not a folding table. A sleek, walnut L-shaped desk that made Logan whistle when he saw it. Damn, that's the kind of desk a CEO dies behind. We laughed. But part of me didn't laugh. Part of me looked at that desk and thought, yeah, one day maybe. Not long after, I ran into Brianna. Total accident. She was at a local cafe with her fiancé Chase, and I had stopped in to grab a coffee after a meeting. I almost turned around when I saw them, but it was too late. She'd already spotted me. Aiden, she called, waving like we were long-lost siblings. I gave a polite nod, hoping she'd leave it at that. She didn't. She came over, full smile on her face. You've been ignoring my texts. I shrugged. Been busy. She clicked her tongue. Well, you look good at least. Better than I expected. What's that supposed to mean? She laughed, like it was a joke. Just, after the whole tantrum. There it was. That word. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something. She still didn't get it. You think I had a tantrum? I asked quietly. She blinked. Well, yeah. I mean, come on, Aiden. You disappeared. You made Mom cry. You lawyered up. They stole my savings. It wasn't like that. They forged my signature. Brianna shifted uncomfortably. They just didn't know how else to ask for help. I smiled, cold and small. Funny. I don't remember them asking. She didn't have a comeback. I finished my coffee and left. Didn't even look back. It was the first time I walked away from her without carrying a backpack of guilt. And it felt like flying. I went home that night. Logan's home, still technically, but it felt like mine now too, and sat at my new desk. Pulled up the saved real estate listing. It was still available. The price had dropped by $2,000. I stared at it for a long time, heart thudding. Then I opened a new tab. Mortgage calculator. I was getting close. Closer than I'd ever been. And as the numbers came together on the screen, a small smile curled at the edge of my lips. They took a piece of me, but I was building something better. Quietly. Steadily. They thought they buried me. They didn't know I was a seed. It was a Tuesday again. Strange how Tuesdays seem to mark turning points in my life. The first time they stole from me, it was a Tuesday. And now, months later, I was holding the final bank letter confirming the fraud ruling in my favor, also on a Tuesday. The bank hadn't recovered all of the funds, but they returned a little over $18,000 to me. That, combined with the extra freelance work and my now even higher paying promotion, Alicia had bumped me again after I helped land a massive client. Put me within arm's reach of something I hadn't dared think about in months, homeownership. On my terms. I sat at my desk, that sleek walnut L shape that had come to symbolize everything I was quietly reclaiming, and stared at my laptop. The real estate listing was still bookmarked in my browser, but I hadn't clicked it in weeks. Not because I wasn't ready, but because something had shifted. I no longer just wanted to move on. I wanted to make it matter. It wasn't about revenge at first. Not consciously. But once the pieces began to fall into place, once I started noticing just how deep my parents' manipulation went, I knew that just walking away wasn't enough. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to burn bridges in some big, dramatic blowout. I was going to let the bridge collapse under them, brick by brick, while I stood on the other side and watched. Because here's what I discovered during my quiet rebuild. There were cracks in their house. And I'm not just talking about the kitchen. I'd been out of their home for nearly 4 months now. The lawyer Harold was working the civil case slowly, deliberately, and methodically, knowing full well my parents were bluffing their way through their own lawyer's weak defense. In the meantime, I started digging, not out of spite, but out of curiosity at first. I wanted to understand why they'd been so desperate. Turns out, the kitchen remodel wasn't just a frivolous project. It was a bandage, a cover-up for the fact that they were trying to refinance the house to offset other debts. I found out by pulling property records. See, after the forged invoice stunt, I realized I needed to look at everything. So I requested copies of the title records for the house and noticed something strange. A second mortgage had been taken out just months before the kitchen remodel began. That second mortgage hadn't been publicized to anyone in the family, and it was oddly timed. It had nothing to do with student loans or home repairs. Then I looked deeper, and what I found made everything click. It wasn't about me. It was about Brianna. More specifically, her wedding. Chase and Brianna had picked a venue way out of their league. Some ridiculous winery-turned-resort 2 hours north of the city, with a rustic barn aesthetic and a private chef. I hadn't asked many questions before, but now I started pulling threads. According to public records, my parents had co-signed on a private loan Chase took out for part of the venue cost. I blinked at the screen. That loan defaulted 2 months ago. So now, not only were my parents on the hook for their own debt, but for Chase's too. That explained the desperation. They'd siphoned my savings not just for a kitchen, but to buy time. They'd used it to appease contractors and keep their finances afloat long enough to avoid default. And they hadn't even told Brianna. I confirmed that later in a very casual, very strategic conversation with her while she gushed about cake tastings over a chance encounter on the sidewalk. She still believed the wedding was fully funded by a smart investment my parents made years ago. No clue it came from my bank account. No clue the roof over their heads was being quietly chipped away with every overdue payment. No clue that the kitchen remodel was just a smokescreen. The moment I understood that, something inside me settled. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was exposure. A surgical unmasking. They built a lie so elaborate they forgot one thing. I wasn't stupid. I was quiet. I played the long game. Always had. And now, they were playing mine. I started with the civil case. Harold and I reviewed our timeline and evidence. We were approaching discovery, and their side was stalling, asking for extensions, avoiding depositions, trying to drag it out. So we filed a motion to expedite, and attached the forged signature documents, and included proof that my login credentials had been accessed from their IP address. The day the motion was filed, I got a call from Brianna. "Aiden," she said, exasperated, "what are you doing?" "Following the law." I replied, tone even. "You're trying to ruin them. They did that on their own." She sighed into the phone. "You know they can't afford this. Chase and I are already covering the rehearsal dinner now." I nearly laughed. Sounds like they can't afford a lot of things. Weird how they still found time to steal from me. She tried again. "Please just can't we settle this? You're not involved in this case, Brianna. I suggest you stay out of it." She hung up on me. That was the first satisfying moment. The second came a few days later. Harold called and said the judge approved the expedited motion. Depositions were now required within 3 weeks. Their lawyer would need to submit evidence or face default judgment. They were cornered, but I wasn't finished. That night, I opened my browser again, found the listing. The same one Logan had shown me. It was still on the market. Price had dropped again. I called the realtor the next morning. She was cheerful. It's still available. It's been sitting for a while, actually. Why? Seller moved out of state. Wants to close quickly. Willing to negotiate. Can we schedule a showing? Of course. How's Thursday? I paused. Make it Tuesday. When I stepped into the condo, it felt surreal. Not luxurious, just real. No one else's name on the lease. No one else's energy in the walls. It was a blank slate. The kitchen wasn't fancy, but it was mine. No marble counters. No designer backsplash. Just clean lines and functional space. It was perfect. I put in an offer that night. Low, but fair. They accepted it the next morning. And then, I did something I hadn't done in months. I smiled. Not the polite kind. The real kind. The one that says, I survived you. I started packing that week. Told Logan I'd be out in a month. He tried to look disappointed, but he couldn't hide the pride in his face. You're really doing it, he said. Starting over. Not just starting over, I said, half smiling. I'm setting the stage. Because I still had one card left to play, and I planned to use it at exactly the right moment. Here's the thing. When people build their reputation on lies, it doesn't take much to bring the whole thing down. Just one truth. Dropped at the perfect time. And I knew exactly when that would be. The wedding. It was 3 months away, and I had an invitation. They'd sent it months ago, back when they still thought I'd eventually calm down and rejoin the family fold. When they believed I'd show up, gift in hand, pretending none of this had ever happened. I hadn't RSVP'd. Not yet. But I would. Because I had plans for that day. Plans that would make every forked lie they told come back to bite them. Quietly. Legally. Perfectly timed. They wanted a perfect wedding? Then they shouldn't have stolen from the one person who knew exactly where the cracks were. And I had just enough time to prepare the final blow. I RSVP'd 2 weeks before the wedding. Will attend. I checked, along with the polite little box for +1. Logan laughed when I told him. I thought you were going to burn the invitation, he said. No, I replied. I'm going to frame it. The wedding was set to take place at the Evergreen Hills Vineyard, this sprawling, whitewashed fantasyland dressed up as a rustic chic wedding venue. It had string lights wrapped around every fence post, a massive floral arch, and servers in suspenders walking around with trays of miniature quiches and cocktails that probably had rosemary in them. It looked expensive. It was expensive. And the moment I pulled into the gravel parking lot, it all felt fake. Beautiful. Well arranged. But fake. Like a stage play where no one realized the props were already cracking. Logan came with me, clean-cut in a navy suit, helping me blend in like I was just another guest. We mingled, sipped overpriced lemonade, and avoided my parents, who were floating through the crowd like minor royalty. Mom wore a floor-length cream dress with lace sleeves, trying to look like she belonged on the cover of a lifestyle magazine. Dad was stiff in his tux, his smile strained, scanning the crowd as if waiting for something, or maybe trying to avoid someone. I hadn't seen either of them since the last time they tried to convince the court it was all a misunderstanding. Spoiler alert, that didn't work. See, after the expedited court order, Harold moved fast. Too fast for them. The forged signature, the unauthorized transfer, and the mounting documentation of their deception formed a tight, airtight case. We'd filed for civil damages totaling $42,000, my stolen savings, legal fees, and additional damages for the unauthorized use of my identity and forged documentation. They tried to settle twice. First at $8,000, then at $12,000. Harold sent both offers back with a single word: insulting. 3 days before the wedding, we got the ruling. They lost. The court ordered them to repay the full $42,000, plus $6,000 in interest and $4,500 in attorney fees. $52,500 in total. They had 30 days to pay or face lien proceedings against their home. And that, in and of itself, would have been enough for some people. But not for me. Because what they did wasn't just financial. It wasn't just theft. It was betrayal wrapped in entitlement, tied with a ribbon of lies. So I didn't just want money. I wanted truth. And that's what I delivered, at the perfect time. The wedding reception started around 6, just as golden hour lit the vineyard in soft amber light. The ceremony itself had been exactly what I expected, full of fake tears, dramatic vows, and Chase looking like he was about to marry into royalty. Brianna was radiant in her dress, of course, and to her credit, she genuinely looked happy. I almost felt bad. Almost. Because she still didn't know where the money came from. Didn't know what her parents had sacrificed to give her this day. Didn't know that her dream wedding was built, quite literally, on stolen ground. And now? Now, she was about to. I waited until the speeches were halfway through. They'd gone the full rom-com route. Best man jokes, teary toasts, a slideshow of their engagement trip to Spain. Then the mic passed to my dad. He stood up, glass in hand, beaming. Family and friends, he began. Thank you all for being here to celebrate this incredible moment. Brianna, our beautiful daughter, has always been the light of our lives. He went on for a while, bragging about her job, her ambition, the way she deserved every ounce of joy. He even made a joke about Chase being lucky to have her. And then, as if on cue, he added, "This wedding has been a labor of love, and we were more than happy to contribute everything we could to make it happen." He looked proud, triumphant, and that's when I stood. Logan looked at me once, gave a short nod. I walked calmly to the back of the room, where a small projector had been set up for the slideshow. The wedding planner, flustered, whispered, "Excuse me, that's off limits." I smiled. "It's all right. I'm family." And then I hit play. The screen blinked to life again. But this time, it wasn't photos of Brianna and Chase at the beach. It was a single document. The bank transfer authorization, showing my name and account number. Then the forged signature. Then a screenshot of the ruling. Case number. Judge's stamp. $52,500 owed in damages. Gasps rippled through the room like a wave. My parents froze. Brianna's jaw dropped. "What is this?" someone whispered. I stepped forward, microphone in hand now. Calm. Clear. "That," I said, gesturing to the screen, "is how this wedding was paid for." The silence was immediate and suffocating. My parents, I continued, voice even, emptied my savings account, money I'd been building for 5 years, to help cover the costs of this venue, this food, that wine you're drinking. They forged my signature on an estimate and lied to contractors. They stole from their own son. I let that settle in the air like dust. They said it was a family contribution. They called me selfish for objecting. And when I took them to court, they lied again. I turned to Brianna, who was staring at me like she'd seen a ghost. "You didn't know?" "I believe that. But now you do." I nodded at the DJ, who promptly turned off the screen. And then I walked out. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just calm, with Logan behind me. We passed a dozen stunned faces on the way to the door, some shocked, some angry, some deeply uncomfortable. My parents never moved. Not once. They just stood there, hollow-eyed, watching everything crumble in real time. We stepped outside into the twilight, and Logan whistled low. "You really did it." "Not yet," I said, because that wasn't the final blow. That came 2 days later. See, the judgment had a 30-day payment deadline. But I knew something they didn't. Their house. It was still carrying that second mortgage. That co-signed loan with Chase. Still unpaid. Between the lien I was about to file and the wedding costs, they had 2 choices. Pay me in full immediately, or lose the house. I filed the lien that Friday morning. And a week later, their lawyer called with an offer. Full payment. No negotiation. They wired the $52,500 the next day. I didn't respond to the email. Didn't return the call. Didn't even smile when the funds hit my account. Because I wasn't surprised. When people build a kingdom of lies, all it takes is one truth to bring the whole thing down. The next month, I moved into my condo. No fanfare. No ribbon cutting. Just me, a key, and a quiet piece of ownership. I set up my desk by the window. Hung my framed RSVP card above it. Sometimes I look at it and remember how it all began. And sometimes, when I'm sipping coffee on my balcony, I wonder what they tell people now. But I don't really care. Because I'm done living in their version of the story. This one's mine now. And I ended it on my terms.